A young man named Lockhart is sent to a spa in Switzerland to bring back his boss, who has refused to return home. Upon arriving, Lockhart notices that something shady is happening at the spa. As he tries to figure it out, he meets a girl named Hannah, who reveals that no one ever leaves the spa. A few days earlier, Lockhart closes a huge contract for his company, and while he celebrates with his colleagues,
oh, how could I?
He is informed that the board of directors wants to see him. As Lockhart then meets them, they make him read a letter from the company's CEO, Pembroke, who went on a 2-week spa vacation and hasn't returned. In the letter, Pembroke says all humans have a sickness inside them and that he's now bent on fully understanding it and getting a cure. Lockhart says it sounds like Pembroke has lost his mind.
Clearly he's lost his mind.
And the directors also agree. As he then wonders what they want with him, the directors tell Lockhart that he has to go to Switzerland to bring back Pembroke so he can sign off on a merger that could make the company the biggest financial institution in the world. Even though he's not too pleased with the task, he eventually agrees to go to Switzerland. The next day, Lockhart arrives in Switzerland. And while he's in a cab to the spa, the driver, Enrico, tells him that he looks younger than most people who go to the spa. Lockhart sounds surprised and asks about the place. So Enrico tells him that he mostly takes rich, old people there. He adds that most of them never leave because they probably like it there. He also mentions that he knows this because he has been a driver for many years after his father passed the business to him. As he says, he learned how to be a man from his father.
The son learns what it is to be a man from his father.
Lockhart mentions that he never really knew his father. Just then he remembers the day his dad parked on a bridge and jumped into the ocean. Even though his mom was there for him as he grew older, it turns out that she also died recently after years of suffering from a mental illness. Shortly after, Enrico's car is attacked by locals in the area. Even though Lockhart is scared, Enrico gets past the thugs and tells Lockhart that it's how the locals have always been. When they eventually get to the facility's gates, Lockhart admires the surroundings and asks Enrico how old the place is. Enrico says it's over 200 years old and that the place used to belong to a baron who married his sister because he wanted a pure bloodline. This didn't seem to go well with the clerics in the area, and on the baron's wedding day, the locals burned his wife to death.
While they burn her alive.
After which they also burnt the church and other buildings around. Enrico then mentions that the spa is now built on the old baron's property. Shortly after, they arrive at the spa, and Lockhart tells Enrico to wait for him because he won't be long. As he enters the facility after seeing several old people around, he meets the nurse at the reception and says he's looking for Pembroke. The nurse tells him that visiting hours are over for the day.
I'm sorry.
But Lockhart looks confused. As she adds that it's against the spa's policy, Lockhart asks to see a manager. Following this, he's taken to meet the deputy director of the facility, who takes a small drop of the liquid inside a small blue bottle before saying anything. As Lockhart wonders what it is, the man says it's his vitamins.
Vitamins.
He also mentions that it's what helps him and the other staff in the facility to be strong, despite all the stress involved in dealing with all the visitors. As Lockhart then looks at the pictures on the wall, he asks what's special about the facility, and the deputy director says they use hydrotherapy to treat their patients. He adds that the water in the spa comes from an old aquifer that came with the property. Lockhart doesn't seem to care, and he asks for Pembroke.
Vicks and jacuzzis to inform Mr. Pembroke.
But the deputy director says that visiting times are over. Lockhart complains about the policy and says he needs to take Pembroke back to New York. This makes the deputy director uncomfortable, but as Lockhart seems bent on seeing Pembroke, the man tells him to come back later in the day. Before he leaves, though, the deputy director offers Lockhart a glass of drinking water, and he drinks it before going to meet Enrico so they can leave. As they're on their way out, Lockhart suddenly sees Hannah standing on the walls guarding the spa, but before he can say anything about it, a deer jumps in front of Enrico's car and causes a serious crash. A while later, Lockhart wakes up in the spa and sees the director of the place, Volmer, watching him. Lockhart looks surprised to see that he's back at the facility, and he asks how long he has been there. Volmer says it has been 3 days, so Lockhart says he needs to call his office. However, Volmer says he already did that.
I took the liberty of informing your office.
And has gotten permission to treat Lockhart until he's better. Lockhart sounds shocked, but he then notices that his right leg has been covered in a plastic cast. Volmer then mentions that he's lucky not to have sustained more injuries. He also tells a nurse to give Lockhart some drinking water so he can rest. Lockhart drinks the water, and after Volmer and the nurse leave, he admires the surroundings of the spa from his window. However, as he's done drinking the water, he notices a strange moving organism inside the cup. But he doesn't think it's anything. He then leaves his room and goes around to look for Pembroke. He gets lost in the process, but after a while, he finds Pembroke inside the steam room. Lockhart then introduces himself and says he's there to take Pembroke back to New York. However, Pembroke says he can't leave because he's not well.
I'm not well.
Lockhart doesn't think there's anything wrong with him, but Pembroke starts talking about the sickness in all humans and how he's at the spa to get the cure. Lockhart gets frustrated and talks about how the company is already in trouble, and this helps him convince Pembroke to come with him. While he then waits for Pembroke to get ready, Lockhart meets the nurse at the reception and tells her to help him get a cab. The nurse says she'll do what she can.
I'll see what I can do.
So Lockhart heads outside and stares at an old building on the spa's premises. Suddenly, a patient at the spa named Watkins shows up and tells Lockhart that the building is part of the church where the Baron's wife was burnt. Lockhart looks shocked to hear this, but Watkins says she has been doing some research about the place. Before they can continue talking, two of Watkins's friends show up and ask Lockhart to play cards with them. However, Lockhart says he's leaving soon with Pembroke.
Just on my way back to New York
And this shocks them. They then ask if Pembroke is now better, and as Lockhart says he is, they mention that it's a good thing. After a while, Lockhart hears Hannah singing nearby. He then meets her and asks what she's doing at the facility, even though she's much younger than everyone else. She says she's Volmer's special case, but Lockhart doesn't understand this. As Lockhart then tells her that he's leaving already, Hannah thinks it's weird because no one ever leaves.
No one ever leaves.
Lockhart asks what she means, but she just says there's no reason for anyone to leave. Shortly after, Lockhart returns inside the facility and discovers that Pembroke has been moved from his room. He then goes to confront Volmer while he's eating with some of the other patients. Volmer says Pembroke has been taken for the next stage of his treatment, but Lockhart looks frustrated as it seems the director doesn't want him to leave. As he's complaining about this, he suddenly starts bleeding from his nose until he passes out. When he wakes up, Volmer says he has conducted some tests which show that Lockhart is really sick. As they're talking about trying a treatment method, Lockhart sees Hannah's picture on Volmer's table and asks about it. The director then says Hannah is a special case and that she's like a daughter to him. Following this, Lockhart agrees to do the treatment, and Volmer leaves his office to prepare for it. However, Lockhart takes advantage of this to find Pembroke's file and hide it. As Volmer then returns to his office, he sees Lockhart admiring a necklace on the table.
VR.
Volmer says the necklace was found during the construction of the spa, and it belonged to the Baron's wife, who was sick. Lockhart looks curious, so Volmer tells him that the sickness made the Baron so focused on finding a cure, which he tried to get by exploring the medicinal properties of the water from the aquifer. Just then, Volmer takes Lockhart into a chamber where he is immersed in water to help remove the toxins in his body. As the procedure begins, Volmer leaves Lockhart under the care of a nurse who can attend to him if he needs anything. Quite surprisingly, Lockhart suddenly sees that he's surrounded by eels, so he tries to call the nurse for help, but he's already distracted. Lockhart nearly drowns, but the nurse eventually manages to rescue him, and it turns out that the eels have already disappeared from the water. When Lockhart returns to his room, he finally checks Pembroke's file, but he doesn't understand what's inside because it's written in German. As he wonders what to do next, he suddenly sees the facility's caretaker wheeling a body into the old church building. This leaves him confused, and the next morning he asks Watkins if she knows what's happening there. She says she doesn't know, though she mentions that she just did some research and discovered that the reason the locals killed the Baron's wife was because the Baron was conducting experiments with his workers. According to Watkins's research, the locals found out about the experiments when they saw the poorly dug graves of the Baron's victims, who looked like mummies.
Like the mummies of Egypt.
As Watkins says she doesn't know what the experiments were conducted for, Lockhart says it was because the Baron's sister was sick. Just then, a nurse comes to take Watkins for another round of treatment, and and as she's being taken away, she whispers to Lockhart and says that something terrible is happening at the facility. After a while, Lockhart then finds Hannah riding a bicycle around. So he asks if she can take him to the nearest town. Hannah looks scared because she has never left the spa, but Lockhart manages to convince her. Shortly after, they leave together and find a bar where they decide to stay for a while. The locals inside the bar don't look too welcoming, but Lockhart just ignores them and goes to get a drink for him and Hannah. While he's at it, he sees Enrico and asks how he has been doing since the accident. Enrico then says it doesn't really bother him anymore because the spa paid him well to get a new car.
Everything happens for a reason.
As they're talking, a constable enters the restaurant and looks surprised to see a patient from the spa at the bar. Lockhart doesn't pay too much attention to him, and he asks Enrico and the barman if there are any doctors around. Enrico says all the doctors are at the spa, but the barman mentions that there's a vet he could probably talk to. Just then, Lockhart returns to sit with Hannah. As they're enjoying their drinks, Hannah brings out her small blue bottle of vitamins and ingests a small drop of it.
Vitamins?
Lockhart asks if he can try it, and Hannah allows him. As he tries it though, Lockhart complains that it tastes of seafood. Following this, he says he'll be back because there's someone he has to see. Shortly after, he meets the nearby vet and shows Pembroke's file to him so he can translate what's there. The vet then takes a look and tells Lockhart that Pembroke has been losing some of his teeth. He adds that it's likely because of dehydration, but this sounds confusing to Lockhart because all the patients at the facility drink a lot of water.
All they do up there is drink water.
As he then asks what would eventually happen, the vet says Pembroke might begin to look like a mummy if his condition worsens. Lockhart then returns to the bar, only to see Hannah dancing. He ignores her and asks the barman for his phone so he can make a call. With this, he calls one of his company's directors, who sounds angry that he hasn't brought Pembroke back. This leaves Lockhart shocked, because he thought Volmer already called earlier. However, he then learns that Volmer never called the office. After the call, Lockhart confronts Hannah about what she said earlier concerning people never leaving the spa, but before she answers, he gets attacked by one of the locals who wants to forcefully dance with the girl. Before he's then killed, Volmer enters the bar and stops the fight. The locals seem terrified of him, and as he leaves with Hannah, Volmer tells Lockhart that he shouldn't have taken her away from the spa.
She's just a child.
After they arrive at the facility, Volmer scolds Hannah for following Lockhart, but she says he's a good person. She also seems angry that Volmer is being overprotective, but he eventually calms her and says he'll make her father come to see her after he makes her better. Elsewhere, Lockhart loses a tooth after drinking some water, and this gets him scared. As he believes he's running out of time, he starts looking for Pembroke again. In the process, he enters a part of the spa where experiments are being carried out on the patients. He also sees Watkins, who looks really pale, though she still tells him that her latest findings indicate that the Baron's experiments were to make his sister get pregnant because she was infertile. Watkins also adds that even though the experiment eventually turned out successful, the locals cut out her fetus and threw it into the aquifer. Interestingly, Watkins says the baby survived, and this leaves Lockhart confused. As he sees a moving organism inside Watkins's body, he gets startled and knocks down a shelf. This alerts the nurses to see him, but he manages to run away and find a nearby room to hide. However, he ends up in a room where he sees that Pembroke and some other patients are already unconscious, while inside a pod filled with water. He immediately tries to leave, but Volmer and some other nurses stop him. He then mentions that he missed his way, but Volmer doesn't believe this. As he also complains about Lockhart's attitude, he gets the deputy director to forcefully remove one of his teeth. Later that night, after Enrico brings in a new guest, Lockhart sneaks into the car and tells him to drive away. Lockhart then meets the constable from the bar, who he tells about everything he thinks is happening at the spa. The constable decides to help, but as he leaves the room, Lockhart realizes that he also works for Volmer. Before he can escape, it's too late, and Volmer enters the house with the deputy director. Lockhart immediately holds a knife and tells them to back off.
Stay away from me!
But they tell him that he needs to return to the spa. Lockhart says he's not a patient and that he already knows about the experiments. However, Volmer denies it and says Lockhart is just having delusions. As Lockhart then mentions that he knows Pembroke is dead, Volmer brings in the CEO to prove him wrong. This leaves him shocked, and he finally believes he's sick. After a few days of following the spa's recommended treatment methods, Lockhart realizes that if he truly got sick at the facility, it must have come from the water. As he pours it away and tears off the plastic cast on his leg, he suddenly realizes that his leg is not broken. He then decides to check out what's inside the old church building. After sneaking out, Lockhart breaks the lock and enters the place only to find an old lab with several body parts, including a cutout face. He also sees the picture of the Baron's sister, who looks a lot like Hannah. Before Lockhart can leave, he hears the caretaker moving some bodies near the aquifer. Lockhart sees this and also watches as the caretaker dumps the bodies into the aquifer so that the eels inside can feed on them. Unfortunately, the caretaker finds Lockhart and attacks him. However, after a brief fight, Lockhart kills him and runs out. Meanwhile, Hannah decides to enter the pool inside the facility, even though Volmer has always told her never to enter. As she does, she starts bleeding, and even though some eels come over to attack her, they eventually just stay back and leave her unhurt. Following this, she heads out of the water and starts looking for Volmer because she doesn't understand what just happened. In the process, Lockhart sees her with a bloody dress and realizes that she has just had her monthly flow for the first time. He tries to tell her that they need to leave, but she hits him and runs away. She then meets Volmer, who looks shocked to see blood on her dress. As he tries to take her away, Lockhart comes in to confront Volmer about what's really happening inside the facility. Volmer asks to speak privately, but Lockhart refuses and calls on the other patients to fight back. However, as they all stand up, they attack him instead. Following this, he gets taken to the lab where he'll be used in the experiments. Surprisingly, he sees Pembroke beside him looking pale. Despite this, though, Pembroke says he has never felt better. Shortly after, Volmer comes in to begin the experiments on Lockhart. As he sets up his equipment, Volmer confesses that the water in the aquifer is toxic to humans. He also adds that just like the Baron, he uses the patients as a filter to make the water a cure for humanity's sickness. Lockhart then struggles to get Volmer to stop, but there's nothing he can do as his body gets filled with eels. As the filtering process begins, Lockhart's body starts producing the cure into a small blue bottle. After the process, Lockhart looks exhausted, and while he's getting some air outside the facility, Hannah sits next to him. She then says he really made her believe he could help her escape, but Lockhart smiles as he says he doesn't know why anyone would want to leave. The next day, Volmer prepares Hannah for a marriage ceremony, which turns out to be with him. Hannah doesn't want this, but she can't object to it, because it seems to be what Volmer has been preparing her for since he took her in. After a while, Volmer then takes Hannah to a secret bedroom. Meanwhile, Lockhart starts thinking of what Watkins told him, as well as the things he saw the other day he killed the caretaker. He then goes to the deputy director's office to check the pictures he saw on the wall when he first arrived. As he looks at them, he sees one with a man whose face is bandaged. Lockhart then breaks the frame and sees that the man is holding a girl who looks like Hannah. At this point, Lockhart realizes that Volmer is the Baron, and he has managed to stay alive due to the unique properties of the filtered water from the aquifer. Lockhart also figures out that Volmer is now marrying Hannah because he wants a pure baby, just like he did with his sister. Before Volmer can do anything, Lockhart finds him and accuses him of trying to sleep with his daughter, who had no idea he was even her father.
She's your daughter.
Volmer gets pissed by this and says that everything he did was for his daughter. He also then reveals his real burnt face, which he found a way to hide after the locals tried to kill him in a fire many years ago. Before Volmer can attack him, Lockhart sets the Baron on fire. Surprisingly, he manages to get rid of the fire, after which he finally attacks Lockhart, who is about to free Hannah. Volmer then takes Lockhart near the aquifer and prepares to throw him inside. Before he can, Hannah appears to have freed herself, and she helps Lockhart get free by killing Volmer, who falls into the aquifer and is eaten by the eels. Shortly after, Lockhart and Hannah go outside only to see that the fire is now burning the entire facility. with all the patients also escaping. Instead of watching for too long, Hannah gets her bicycle and tells Lockhart that they need to leave. He then rides the bicycle and leaves with her. However, he suddenly bumps into his company's board of directors, who are heading to the spa to find him and Pembroke, since the company is now at risk of collapsing. As they ask Lockhart what's happening, he says Pembroke is gone. They don't understand this, so they tell him to come with them to find Pembroke at the spa. Lockhart refuses to follow them, and as they ask if he has lost his mind, he says he's actually feeling much better. Following this, he climbs the bicycle and leaves with Hannah, while having a big smile on his face.